Hello. I wonder where you'd rather be right now. If I was to ask this question of you sometime about a month or so ago, I can't imagine that many of you would have said you'd really like to be back in school. But we know from what you've told us, and from what your parents have told us, even if you've not admitted it yourselves, that many of you are desperate to return to the surroundings you know and love. To sit in your tutor base, hearing the familiar list of names called at the start of the day. To be able to speak freely rather than having to wait in turn as you're unmuted in an online lesson or tutor call. To trudge up the stairs to your usual classrooms, feeling that sense of anticipation as to what you'll be learning today. To take in the familiar aromas of the Aldenham community, the fresh country air, the stale smell of the chags, the delicious sense of freshly cooked fish and chips emanating from the dining room on a Friday. Well, here I am, sat in my last nice little garden on a glorious spring day, thinking exactly the same thing. There's really no place I'd rather be right now than back at Aldenham. Back amongst the colleagues I know and respect. Back in front of the students from whom I've learnt so much. And back in the chapel, a place which has shaped my faith like few other buildings over the course of the last decade or so. In this period of great dislocation, it's tempting to think of those favourite places we have. They may of course not be our school, but none of them has been a place we've been able to go to recently. They may be where we were heading for a city break with our family over Easter. They may be our bolt hole by the sea where everything seems simpler and we can retreat from the busyness of modern life. Or they may be the home of our relatives, off limits since they went into isolation 6 weeks ago. There's no doubt about it, places are important. And as Joni Mitchell once sang, you don't know what you've got till it's gone. I had no idea how much I would miss my Easter holiday until it was taken away from me. And I guess many tears have been shed as holiday plans have been adjusted and shattered over the last few weeks. Hankering to be somewhere else is an entirely natural reaction. It's a theme which dominates the Hebrew Bible, when God's chosen people had to leave their homeland and became exiled from it. And when, in the words of the writer of Psalm 137, all they could do was remember how life was in the past and hope that they could return there one day. How shall we sing the Lord's song in a strange land, they lamented, as they sat by the rivers of Babylon. Of course, most of us aren't in a strange land. We're where we've been for rather too long, if anything. But however much we have at home, we've probably begun to exhaust the amusements of our current surroundings and just want to leave the place we find ourselves in. Cabin fever is such a reality to many of us, isn't it? It's not surprising life is tough for many people at this time. And if you're struggling with it, please let it be known that you are not alone. Just make sure you tell somebody about your difficulty, and we'll do all we can to help you find support. But how can we make sense of where we are, particularly as we don't know how long we'll be here for? Well, I think there are 3 important messages here to follow. The first is that the people who cope best with incarceration, and that's just another name for not being able to go where we want and do what we want, are those who establish a routine. That's one of the reasons why we've moved to put a bit more structure in your school timetable, so that one day just doesn't morph into another. Terry Waite was imprisoned for 1,763 days as an envoy of the Archbishop of Canterbury in Beirut. He insisted that every day he'd get changed out of his pyjamas and make himself look presentable, even though he'd meet nobody other than his guards nearly every day. And he'd also stick as closely to a routine as he could. The second point, I think, is to make the most of where we are. Nelson Mandela was imprisoned for 27 years. Throughout his time, he had a strict routine which kept him as fit as the day he went into prison. I'm not sure about you, but I don't think I could start each day with 45 minutes of running off on the spot and hundreds of sit-ups and other exercises. But being able to appreciate where he was enabled Mandela to get through the experience of being cut off from the outside world. Learning to love, or at least put up with where we are, is a mindset we could all do well to seek in these days. Rev Peris touched on this last week when she talked about noticing the small things, the bird song, the passing train you may have just heard, the opening spring buds all around us. And the third point is to look forward to the day we'll meet again. Eventually the lockdown will be lifted and we'll all be able to go back to the places we know and love. Just like the people of Israel, just like Terry Waite, and just like Nelson Mandela. In the meantime, let me reassure you that it's okay to feel a sense of rage and despondency. It's okay to be frustrated that you seem to be stuck inside day after day after day. And it's okay that some days you don't want to do anything at all. These things are entirely natural. But one thing that's keeping me going through this process is the hope of knowing we will be back together again one day. We will get to laugh at each other's haircuts and corny jokes and trousers that have grown short in the time we've been off. And we will get to sing Jerusalem in the school chapel, which is always a bit of a tearjerker for me. Until that day, my prayer is that we'll all be able to hold on to what we have, and that we will be able to make sense of the place in which we find ourselves during this difficult time. God bless.